Obviously, the reason you were called today is because of the large seizure of heroin that was made on Interstate I-95 last night about 8:30 p.m. The vehicle stopped at the 134-mile marker northbound coming to Rocky Mount. The occupants, upon the first approach and first conversation, stated that they were coming from Houston, Texas, and they were driving 18 hours to the city of Rocky Mount. The occupants were a Luis Gonzalez, Carlos Hernandez, what was the right front passenger, Mr. Gonzalez was the driver, and a Mr. Valentin, and I have to give you the spelling of the last name, of Bermudez. These were possibly, and we're looking into it at this time, all illegals in the United States. They had left the point of contact upon the first conversations with them of leaving Houston, traveling to Rocky Mount. They were stopped about 4 miles before they got into the city of Rocky Mount, and which ended up yielding over 3.5 pounds of heroin. This is uncut heroin. You look at it and you say, well, that's not much heroin. That's an awful lot of heroin that's coming into a community. When you look at it, this is pure, and by the time it's broken down into bundles, which is the smallest amount that they sell, it's cut several times, probably 3 or 4 times the amount of that. So the street value of this is working around $1 million to $1.5 million worth of heroin that's coming into the community. Just in Nash County alone, we've had 90 overdose calls, most of this on opioids and heroin since January the 1st. We've had 99 interventions with Narcan. That's what's bringing people back, saving their lives. The fatalities, we're having overdoses weekly to monthly that's ending up in fatalities. Provisional data from CDC is there's 66,000 deaths annually from this opioid epidemic that's going on in America today. The leading cause of death with Americans under 50 is opioids. And drugs now kill more people in the U.S. each year than either car accidents or guns. So you can see what an epidemic that we're dealing with today. These 3 individuals that we stopped or interdicted last night is the direct cause of what's going on in America today. And I'm pleased to announce that our drug interdiction team stopped this stuff a mere 4 miles short of getting into the city of Rocky Mount after they traveled 18 hours across America to bring this poison into our communities. But as you can see here, the way it was packaged, the cell phone data, and the pillar here that is was used to conceal today. They use great means to conceal this stuff coming across the border and eventually into our communities. But I'd like to take questions from y'all now if you have any questions to answer.
The distance that this traveled across the country, how many more communities besides Rocky Mount were going to be affected by this load of drugs?
That amount of drugs here will obviously supply Rocky Mount, Wilson, and Greenville for some time. And the residual effect of this now, what we're going to see is that these people that are addicted to heroin, they're not going to be able to get heroin right now because this has cut off a large supply of this. And our calls for mental transports of people being taken into the hospitals and things of that nature because they're going through withdrawals is going to greatly increase. That taxes our EMS systems, that taxes our doctors, that taxes law enforcement having to take these people back and forth to treatment facilities. So on one end, it's a good thing that we stopped this, but on the other end, we're going to have an increased call in people going through withdrawals.
Do you think this was the area, this was the destination for these drugs?
Definitely. I was on the vehicle stop when it happened last night, talked to the front passenger, and he said he was going to Rocky Mount.
What was the initial stop for?
Following too close. I guess he was in a rush to get where he was going. You know, after 18 hours of driving, you're not on your P's and Q's, and following too close and speeding is 2 of the top problems on interstate systems that result in traffic fatalities, and these individuals were following too close.
So you were there last night then?
I was there.
So once you started talking to these guys for that initial traffic stop, what tipped you or the other deputies thought that something else was going on here?
After the vehicle stopped, a conversation occurred and there was discrepancies, and also there was a small amount of marijuana in the vehicle.
And so you have the canine come out,
That is correct.
and I mean, like you said, this is a lot of heroin. So when the canine gets a hit, what were you expecting this amount?
I was not expecting this amount. I was expecting criminal activity, but you got to remember, these guys that are working on the interstate with our drug interdiction, they're dealing with people all across America, the worst of the worst. When people are on the run across America and things, how do they get from place to place? They're not having to show IDs riding up and down the interstate, but they have to on planes, and they have to get on trains and things of that nature, so they drive or they ride. So you don't ever know what you're really dealing with. And it was astounding to me to see this amount. I mean, that's $1 million worth of drugs after it's broken down that's coming into our communities. We all know we've got epidemic problems, but this is a direct correlation of how this stuff is coming across the borders, coming into America, and killing our citizens every day.
And just, you talk about, obviously, I mean, we know there's an opioid epidemic, specifically heroin and fentanyl. Could this potentially have claimed lives in your county?
Definitely it's going to claim lives. And if it's not going to claim them immediate, the residual of it, it does claim lives. If you're addicted to heroin, eventually you're going to overdose. I mean, there's no real way to get off this stuff unless you go through a very extensive rehabilitation, which costs a lot of money. And like I said earlier, 66,000 deaths. It's a lot of deaths that's contributed to this. And that's the root cause of it. And it's people coming into our country that don't even belong here, that's bringing this poison here and disseminating it into our communities.
Are there going to be any other arrests involved in this?
Obviously, we turned this over to the DEA and Homeland Security, and I definitely hope so, and they do a great job at the follow-up on it. This is the initial start of it, but there is an investigation that will continue with this. Yes, ma'am.
Is this one of the biggest busts that you have made in the department?
This is one of the largest busts of heroin. They make large busts all times of the night. Of heroin, definitely it is. It's one of the largest ones we did. But they continuously making seizures on the interstate at all the time. But this is one of the large ones. And often I get asked, well, what is interdiction doing for Nash County? My philosophy on that is just as you see right here, 4 miles before it gets off into our community. And then as good stewards of America, we need to be stopping this stuff going all across America, whether you're saving a life in New York or you're saving a life in Nash County. But this is a direct result of what's coming to our communities.
You talk about drugs and illegal activity on 95, on the interstate. Is that, having the interstate so close to your community, is that a problem or part of the, is that why you have to feel so responsible?
I talk to sheriffs and chiefs of police. It's an epidemic all across America. I look at it as a plus of having an interstate through our county because we're working this drug problem. And whether we're stopping it from going into eastern North Carolina or going into South Virginia or stopping it in Maine, we're a small part of the puzzle to interdict this stuff before it gets into communities.
I know this is a big bust for you guys. How many small busts do you make, say, in a month's time that we don't hear about?
We're making cash seizures. We probably made close to $500,000 in cash alone of stopping the drug trade and smuggling trade. This year alone, they're making interdiction stops daily. This is not connected to our task force, but our task force has members from surrounding areas work with us, Nash and Edgecombe County, and the local police departments. And they're also on the front of working drugs, and they're doing seizures every day too. Thank the guys and girls in law enforcement are working every day. Very dangerous job, not only from the effects of the criminal activity out there, but the interstate, obviously, with the traffic patterns and the high speeds and things of that nature. I commend them every day for what they do. And the law enforcement officers are protecting us. But thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff was actually down there yesterday, so he can actually tell you a little bit more about it.